And welcome to the SpartanMag.com VCast. Jim Comparoni, Paul Konyndyk. Spartans defeated Florida Atlantic 86-69. Give us a like here, the Spartan Mag YouTube channel. Also subscribe. Love to have you a subscriber here. Go to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. Continued coverage of Michigan State football in the transfer portal. Pretty aggressive over there. We'll be breaking down those players, what they're all about, how they fit, and how good they are, and how far some of them need to go to be contributors and plus players. We'll have those forecasts throughout SpartanMag.com. Paul Konyndyk here. We're going to talk Michigan State basketball. Michigan State came out not perfect from start to finish. Florida Atlantic did a good job to stay competitive, even though Michigan State threw a lot of exciting plays at them. Coen Carr had a huge game, career highs in scoring and rebounding, 5 dunks on 7 field goals. And Michigan State goes to 10-2, ranked number 20 in the country. Takes some time off for Christmas now. Western Michigan will be here next weekend, I think it will be. And Michigan State with a win, Paul. Coen Carr getting a lot of highlights today, people talking about him.
I think it wasn't just the dunks, it was the effort that he put in. And I'll say this, he hit a 3 late in the game, but he deserved it, and the basketball gods gave it to him because he played as hard as anybody on the Michigan State team for every single minute he was out there. We've seen more and more of these plays where he's a defensive play on one end, sprints the floor, makes a spectacular play on the other end. The two the Euro step plays that he made today were amazing. The Euro step layup, which was actually harder than the Euro step dunk, but those were terrific plays. And then, just his effort as a rebounding team. You can look at Florida Atlantic and say, hey, well, they should have beat him by 20 points. And I wouldn't necessarily disagree, but this is also a team that has played for 2 years now in the same conference as Memphis in Wichita State. And those guys came in here expecting to win. They've been competitive in every game they've played. Beat Oklahoma State. Should have beat Seton Hall in a non-conference game, and they've been close. This is a team that doesn't have Dusty May as a head coach, but they do have talent, name recognition. They've been able to get good guys from the portal as a result of that. We've seen it over the years with like VCU. They lose Shaka Smart. Mike Rhodes comes in, and they still have some pretty good teams. And this team had some good length in the front court, and I think that hurt Michigan State. They had some good athleticism at the guard position. And so this wasn't really a team that you look at that had too many weaknesses out there on the floor. Yeah, they missed shots. They usually hit a lot more threes than they did today. But this is a good sparring partner, and I think this will look a lot. I don't know what it's going to look like, but I expect FAU, given their composition of their roster, to be right there competing in that conference, given that they've got guys that can come off the bench. They had a guy that scored 24 points off the bench today, and he was dynamic. They got good guards, and they're a lot like Michigan State, a poor man's Michigan State, but they're very athletic at a lot of positions. And you usually don't see that against mid-majors where everybody can match Michigan State's athleticism.
Yeah, it's a mid-major plus. Florida Atlantic's a mid-major plus. The record's not very good this year yet.
7-4, but they played a good schedule.
They're
7-5 now.
7-6. So, isn't it 7-6? They've lost a couple games in overtime, a couple of 2-point games to Seton Hall and somebody else. They beat Oklahoma State, I think. But over the years, it's been a mid-major plus. So Michigan State, scheduling-wise, they'll get some points for this in the net and those type of things later in the year. But Florida Atlantic, some good individuals. Izzo said that they had some sleepless nights getting ready for this team. You can tell when he's serious at practice a couple days ago when he says, these guys are going to be a hassle. He meant it, and Michigan State played okay. But with Florida Atlantic, it seemed like when they did a good job hanging in, but then they would Florida Atlantic would fall asleep a little bit. You saw the difference between a program that's not used to playing Michigan State. A couple times Michigan State had answers for them in the blitz, wide open three-pointer in transition. Florida Atlantic called a timeout. He's tried to. I don't know if they understood. They've not played Michigan State a lot, so I think that worked to Michigan State's advantage today. So Michigan State, Coen Carr, I agree exactly with what you're talking about. Playing hard, he's always had that high-flying ability, but he is seeing that if he not only sprints the floor, but his first 2 steps in transition, that's where Andre Hudson used to beat people. As soon as there's a change of possession, the first 2 steps, and then this guy, Carr, can accelerate even more. He is seeing it pay off for him, some paybacks, if he really sprints the court. He's learned that since he's come to Michigan State, and that's getting him some avenues to the rim, and the finishes that have just been spectacular.
Yeah, and then, the place that really kind of demoralized teams is offensive rebounds, and he had 3 of them today, but I felt like he was right in the neighborhood for even more of them. He's getting becoming a better rebounder. And some of the defensive rebounds, Florida Atlantic was not a good rebounding statistically wise coming into this. But I listened to their head coach Jeff Frakes, his weekly press conference, and he's a guy that comes from Baylor and Gonzaga. And the stuff that he was talking about, like how good Michigan State is, how mentally tough, how physically tough they were, he's talking like that these guys are like, unbeatable. And I think it was obviously he has respect for Michigan State, but it was a psychological move on his part to get his team ready to play at a level that maybe they weren't capable of. And I felt like when they were still hanging around in this game before things got kind of Michigan State got a double-digit lead late in the first half, it was because they were actually battling Michigan State on the boards. When it was 20-20, this is a team that is probably a little bit on the plus side for rebounding this year, but when it was 20 points to 20 points, it was 7 minutes left in the first half. I leaned over to you and I said, man, if it's even rebounding-wise, FAU is going to win this game. And at
that point, it was even.
Yeah, at that point, it was even. And then Michigan State, they started getting hustle plays. I thought, like some gritty. Some of the things that I liked about this game, like we talk about Coen Carr and the grit that he had, but guys like Jeremy Fears and some other guys hitting timely baskets, like just to stop, like run type of things. It made me feel good about what's up next for Michigan State in terms of the Big Ten, because there's a lot of possession. There's a lot of points in this game that hung on different possessions. Okay, you get a stop here and you can get something going the other way. Michigan State can build on its lead, but I felt like there's a lot of timely shot making, a lot of timely rebounding, and guys like Coen Carr, Jeremy Fears. Jaden Akins had some stuff in the second half. Trey Holloman didn't have a great game, but he had some moments where he hit big shots. So, hey, there's leaf blowers in the stands, and I turned into Butterfingers again. But I thought there was some grit to this game that Michigan State showed. And this is the time of year when a lot of good teams like Michigan State lose to average teams because there's not that kind of grit. And this is a game where Michigan State also got to see what they look like, how they'd handle being the hunted again. This is the first time Michigan State's been ranked for a couple of weeks in a row. People are starting to talk about, Tom Izzo's getting the team back to where he had it. Now they get to see what it's like to play against a team that comes in here looking for an upset, hungry and believing they can do it.
We've seen this against Oakland University and a couple other teams where Michigan State, the opponent does well for about 10 minutes, but we're seeing trends where Michigan State, as they get into their depth, they've got more depth, they play hard, and they wear teams down. Florida Atlantic came in and played hard, played well for a while, but you mentioned rebounding was even when the score was 20-20. Michigan State ends up plus 12 in rebounding, so from that point on, it was plus 12 over the course of about 25 minutes, and that helped turn the game around. The other thing about Coen Carr, when he has one of these, something we're seeing with him is when he has one of these amazing dunks, his defense at the other end, it gets ignited, because we saw him get a steal and right after one of his dunks, which led to another one. And one of his dunks initially began with a really good heady switch to come over as a help defender. He's doing a better job of reading things and just having a handle on it with experience, which is leading to some runouts. So a lot of areas where he's doing some things. I've said this before. And I talked to him about it a little bit in the locker room. I'd like to see him with his ability to elevate and his improved ability to put it on the deck. He had that nice drive for that Euro step on the left side layup early in the game. Glasser, his first shift. His ability to put the ball on the deck, people are seeing that it's a power dribble and he covers ground and he's just kind of a freight train. And his shot is getting better. You're seeing that in free throws. We're not going to see many three-pointers from him. Saw one today. But with his quickness and his ability to elevate, and the shot is improving, the pull-up jumper at 15 feet would be so hard to stop with him. He might not make it, but in terms of preventing him from getting that shot, that's something I always felt that Miles Bridges should have had here, and maybe it happened later, but it did not happen while he was here. This guy, improved ability to put it on the deck, rise up 14-footer. It's impossible to get a hand in that face or affect that shot. It's up to him to whether he can make it or not. I think that could become a strong money shot for him in Michigan State. I don't know if we'll ever see it this year or for him. That's just something I'd like to see. I'd like to see that in the Michigan State stocking on Christmas morning.
The other thing with that shot you're talking about, I think in today's game, kids are because they're so afraid of being put on a poster. And I see this like watching, even watching Michigan State games today. I saw a couple guys vacate the lane, and that's a no-no.
For Michigan State?
Yeah, I saw a couple times where.
That's not cool.
Yeah, like.
I agree.
I'll talk about it later, but it's becoming like more and more games I was watching. Like watching Butler the other night.
Uh-huh.
Thad Matta is a good coach, and it shocks me to see guys getting out of the lane. Pierre Brooks being one of them, because the guy's going to dunk on him. And I just think with a guy like, and I don't mean to go like old man on anybody, But to me, having a high school coach who was a Division III All-American, I got dunked on in practice all the time. There's nothing wrong with getting dunked on. What's wrong is backing out.
That's wrong.
That's wrong.
100%.
It's nothing wrong with being on the poster. It's hiding in the corner, cringing with your hands over your head in the surrender cobra. That's wrong.
Preach.
So, anyways, but Coen Carr, with the way the game is now, and the way kids are rewired to think about not wanting to be on a poster, not wanting to take a hit, guys are already backpedaling hard when he's coming down the lane, and he can do a lot with it.
FAU did not. That's what I
Right.
loved about them. Number 12, Carroll, showed up twice and got dunked on, and so did their guard. What was the guard's name? I don't know. Leland Walker got dunked on. Credit to them. They showed up, and they tried to challenge that young man. I had no shame at all in that.
That's where you see the Baylor.
In my opinion.
That's where you see the Baylor influence.
And anyone that wants to put shame on them are not good people.
Right, but that's the Baylor influence. That's a cultural Baylor type thing. I've
Show up at the rim.
never seen and I haven't watched every Baylor game, but every time I've seen them play Michigan State, they make it's like old school. You got to make it count, and so I like that aspect. I felt like this is the first time that Michigan State's played a mid-major that there hasn't been a single guard that you could exploit. I felt like that little spazzy guard that they had, their point guard. I mean, there's some athleticism out there, and I thought Michigan State handled it well, and I thought they did a nice job of some of their length, made some of the passes that Michigan State usually throws in transition, harder to get, and that's that's another Baylor type thing. So this is not a typical roster. And I was thinking about that head coach too, because he's one of the best recruiters at Baylor. He was the guy that recruited Jeremy Sohan out of Poland, kid I really liked. I thought Michigan State should have got a lot harder after him, but so they know what they're doing as far as getting athletes, and I thought this was a good test, because I felt like this team was harder to play than Minnesota was when Michigan State played them, or where they did some more things when Michigan State played them. They put up more of a challenge than Nebraska did when they were on this floor.
Sure, and you look around the Big Ten right now, I think 14 of the 18 teams have at least a 70% winning percentage. You've watched a lot of teams in the Big Ten. Oregon and UCLA are ranked high. They're creating some buzz. They're going to have trouble with the travel when we get back into the Big Ten season.
And they're also going to have trouble. Both those teams are going to have trouble with teams that have depth that can run, because I feel like Oregon under Dana Altman, one of the things that I think he's always had an issue with is sometimes they have that big man that can play on the perimeter, but they force him to play too many minutes on the perimeter, and sometimes those guys fade. I think Michigan State's depth and the way that they do some different things is going to be a real problem for some of those teams.
Yeah, and when I talk about travel, I've mentioned this before, but Bob Huggins, when he was at West Virginia, when they joined the Big 12, he complained about the back and forth travel, back and forth, West Virginia to Texas, West Virginia to Kansas State, to Kansas to Iowa State, and that was just halfway across the country. You bring Oregon and UCLA over and over, it's gonna if they already have kind of a depth problem. Those are good teams, I think, but they're going to have trouble reaching their potential in terms of wins as they get acclimated to this. That's going to be difficult for them. Meanwhile, Michigan State, with their schedule, I've not really looked closely at their schedule in the Big Ten and so forth, but Michigan State wasn't necessarily considered a prime contender to win the Big Ten regular season, for what that's worth these days. Izzo said today he wants consistency from his team, and he's been pretty happy with that. He feels since Michigan State has started shooting better, the defense has lapsed, so he wants to get that going again. But the rebounding has really come around. Another game with a rebounding margin into double digits. That's a good sign in terms of what Izzo wants for consistency.
I think the commitment to rebounding, I mean, there's, like we talked about this before, there's no one guy on there that you're going to be like, is like a Draymond Green or Xavier Tillman type rebounder. Jackson Kohler's been pretty dang good. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
Maybe he's that guy, but there's not any Antonio Smith, but there's a team-wide commitment to rebounding. And today I thought it was interesting because I didn't feel like Kohler, when he was in there, was really good as a rebounder, but I didn't feel like some of the guys were holding their weight. Xavier Booker was terrible rebounding today, but I felt like some of the guards picked up the slack. You saw Jace Richardson have 7 boards. Jaden Akins went in there and got 5 boards today. Frankie Fidler only had 1 board, but it was a really good one. So I think these guys, what I'm trying to say is I think there's a team commitment to rebounding that hasn't been there, in the past few years, and they need that for Michigan State to be Michigan State, especially if you want to get the transition game going.
Right. Paul, just a few years ago, the state of Michigan ranked first in the nation in deposit container recycling. 90% of all purchased bottles and cans were being redeemed for their deposits in the state of Michigan. Today, only 73% are being redeemed in the state of Michigan. That means Michiganders are forfeiting $105 million every year in bottle and can deposits that are not being redeemed. This deficit is having a negative impact on the environment. When Michigan's recycling rate drops, it hurts the environment, it hurts industry, and it hurts everybody. So help the environment, help yourself, take them back. They're your lakes, your roads, and your beaches, and it's your dime. So take them back. It's worth your time, and everyone will benefit. Take them back. That's a message from Schupan, a company dedicated to recycling and dedicated to the Michigan State Spartans. Now, Michigan State, the substitution pattern is something that Michigan State, even though they've had the same starting lineup for several games, it's a little bit of a, I don't know if there's peak efficiency with that. Izzo mentioned today he had some guards that got tired. Excuse me, I think he's talking about Trey Holloman, and we talked about that during the game. I think Trey starts with Jeremy Fears, and then Fears goes and sits at the 4-minute mark, like Michigan State has traditionally done with their point guards, and Holloman stays on the court and moves to the point. They had a few games where they both sat, and Richardson would come in and run the point. So if you keep Holloman on the court, he's playing the first 8 minutes of the game, which might not sound like a lot, but in this system where you're trying to push it and go all the time, you can wear people out kind of quickly. And I saw Trey Holloman over here during a free throw, really gassed 8 minutes into the game. And that was right after he had really a sloppy turnover on a diagonal transition look. Nothing against Trey Holloman, but he's in there trying to play those 8 minutes. It's in terms of optimal efficiency, it's hard to get that when you have a point guard move from the 2 to the 1. I know they used to do that with Charlie Bell years ago when Cleves would sit, then Charlie moved to the point, and then Charlie would sit, and then the team would come back in. They play together at the beginning and the end of both halves, but they would rotate their seating. Now, I thought Michigan State was really good maybe 5 or 6 games ago when Richardson did come to the point, and, well, actually, let me go back even further. Trey Holloman, I'm not saying he does not deserve to start, because he does. He does a lot of great things. Good leader, works hard, does a lot of good things. But I thought that he and the pace of Michigan State was better when he was coming off the bench, because he would check in at the 16-minute mark, and he's fresh and ready to go. The other team is getting into the game. Now you're bringing in Holloman, a backup point guard that's a starting quality point guard, rather than moving him to the point at the 4-minute mark when he's already on the floor. Move him to the point coming off the bench. Just a little more fuel. Now the question is, well, who starts in place of Holloman? Early in the year it was Fiddler. Fiddler's not playing well enough. He's been moved to the bench. Today Fiddler was the 10th man for the first time ever. They had their first set of substitutes, and it was 4 of them, and Frankie was still on the bench. And Frankie did a good job with the free throw line again. A good job on a drive to the hole in the first half, a 15-footer in the first half. Did a real nice job on a loose ball, winning a loose ball down the sideline, working hard, doing some things. Missed a couple of 3-pointers, so Frankie's still only shooting 16% from 3. If he wants to play more or get back in the starting lineup, he's got to be closer to that 35, 39% 3-point shooter he's been early in his career. So I don't know if Michigan State can arrive at that type of situation. The next idea would be Jace Richardson as a starter. I don't know if that's best for the team, but today I thought that it was not tremendously efficient in terms of Holloman staying on the court for the first 8 or 9 minutes of the game. Got a little gas, like Izzo said. Had some turnover sloppiness, and the score is tied 20-20. Holloman's good enough to start. I just don't know if that's the best way for the entire substitute pattern to go. Izzo, he really likes to work with that substitute pattern to get peak efficiency. And Richardson's been good coming off the bench. It'd be great if Fiddler was a 40% shooter, but he's not. So having 2 point guards on the court in the starting lineup, and then what you do at the 16-minute mark is something that this team has to figure out.
Would it be better if he just stayed at the 2 guard? And
bring Richardson in the point?
Yeah, I mean, that's another option, because, one of the things is that in this game with athletic guards, and there's really no way, you got to play both ends of the floor. And that's the thing about playing this team. They did make you run around if you're a guard, and on defense you had to work hard. And, so I can see where that fatigue factor would be coming into play. It's interesting because I think Jace Richardson is really good as a point guard. I think Trey is as well. But yeah, like you said, there is some intriguing things. I thought one of the other issues moving forward besides the rotation is Michigan State's got to find a way for Jackson Kohler to be effective against length in the front in the front court. I think a lot of it's psychological. He got his shot affected a couple times early in this game in the first couple possessions by the length of FAU, and you could see like the wheels in his head turning when he got the ball in the post the rest of the game.
And they were shooting sometimes triple teams at him a little
bit.
Yeah,
they were, but a lot of it wasn't. A lot of it was like those phantom kind of like things, and he was, I think some of it would be like if he had the confidence, like in his jump hook. And a jump hook, I don't care if you're 6'8", even if you got a 7-footer on you, if you do your jump hook right and you're strong as Kohler is, you should be able to get that shot off without it getting blocked. He's got to mentally get to the point where he doesn't feel like he has to do too much or do something extra, when he's facing length on the interior. Because today, I think a lot of it was just mental on his part.
Izzo said it was a big deal today to keep the players mentally focused for the last game before traveling. A lot of these guys are traveling, headed out of town, like right as we speak. And Izzo's saying, as a venerable head coach, he's seen guys check out mentally before the game. And he told the players that the most important hours today were between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., the 4 hours before tip-off, not the 2 hours after tip-off, staying connected and getting this business done. And he felt that Michigan State, to quote Izzo, was just so-so in that regard. Some of the guys were not as sharp or as efficient. Maybe the finishing got a little bit off. But Coen Carr certainly was not in that category.
I feel like I'm going to say a couple guys. The one guy that I think that I've been really impressed with in the last 4 games, Xavier Booker. I thought he's making strides and being effortful. Today he was not. Today he reverted to the early season Xavier Booker where he's not going hard on rebounds.
He's laid on a loose ball one time.
T-Rexing 3-point shots and watching it and then just jogging backwards on the way, down the floor.
And they missed a switch too. Yeah. One time gave up an open three-pointer.
And he also missed I counted 2 screens in the first half that he was supposed to make that he did not make, and it messed up a play to where guys were taking shots late in the shot clock that it wasn't supposed to be like that. And I saw his point guard saying, "Hey, you're supposed to set a screen over here." So he's a guy that
he's got to stay locked in.
I mean, the one thing that he needed to do, he had a good game against Oakland, but we talked about this afterwards. The one area that was missing was the closeouts, the effort and energy, and effort and energy was not there for him today, and it was a disappointment because he's a guy that was kind of earning stuff, making progress, and all of a sudden you're like, now what can you expect to get out of him? His shot wasn't falling. He was missing threes today. He had one dunk late, but it was kind of a gift type of thing where it was wide open, and I saw him make 1 2-hand rebound late, but he did not play to the level that he needs to play, just effort and energy related, and that was a disappointment to me.
Izzo says he needs to get more like Carson Cooper. There was one time when Cooper left something a little short, and Izzo, get him out of there, and then Booker was the guy going in. So when Booker is the replacement, when there's a little bit of a slippage,
yeah, that's not good.
That's not good.
Izzo's he's gonna look at that, and he's gonna be like, oh, that's not gonna work.
And Cooper's got it in him. Izzo says he needs to get Cooper getting back to being solid. Izzo said that Cooper's been his most solid guy. And in terms of defense, and in defense, you're going to need him. Like when you play Michigan with the way they do the 4-5 game, you're going to need Cooper in there defensively, and to not be, a void offensively. And Cooper, the last 2 games, struggled a little bit. Last game against Oakland, I thought Michigan State did a good job coming out of finals week and played pretty well. Not Cooper, though. Right. And this game today, Cooper had a couple of errors and, took the mask off, so he's getting comfortable with that again. You know what Cooper can do, and he's improved. He had a nice catch today and a finish. And I mentioned to you that he wouldn't have caught that ball 2 years ago. So other areas of his game have come around. He's shooting free throws better. The defense has always been there. He's becoming a stronger man. So, in terms of the bumper car stuff, he's better at that. Cooper can play better than he has the last couple of games. Like Izzo said, they're going to need that from him. You don't leave that guy behind. He needs to keep coming along because he's an important cog in the whole thing.
Yeah, and Holloman, I think also he can play better. He had 2 big threes today, and that was good to see because they were both difficult ones. Or one was they were real timely.
A couple of shot selections for him that I'm not sure Izzo loved.
Yeah, so that's something, and I don't know, you can't force it. But, I think Holloman is a guy that could play better. I thought today impressed me because Jaden Akins wasn't like a big-time scorer in this game, or wasn't a guy that they were looking at, but he made some tough shots.
Yeah, he did. Off the dribble, medium range with him has been pretty good. 1 out of 4 from 3-point range. With Akins,
in the break, too. I mean, he had a couple of rebounds that he just took down the floor, and he was, really good.
Create a loose ball deflection and went in and
beating that's one other thing I like about FAU, man. Those guys did not just spectate when guys were going down the floor. They chased hard.
And that made the highlights better because when Carr was throwing down those dunks, there was people in there challenging him, but that was fun. Akins, this year he's doing more off the dribble and more passing. That's a guy that had very few assists last year and free throws because of the way he was just kind of his game was kind of in a box. It's expanded this year a little bit. Sometimes you'll see him deliver a really good pass, and then he'll follow it up with a wild pitch. So he needs to, Izzo talks about hit singles. Don't go for doubles and triples all the time. Singles. That needs to apply to Akins as he finds, his game. He's doing more off the dribble, but you're not John Stockton. So when he delivers a pass, he's an unselfish guy. He's a team guy, so he wants to make some nice passes, but discretion's the better part of valor on those sometimes as he finds his optimal game.
You're a baseball guy, right? So I think some of this stuff is fundamental based. When a guy throws sometimes like a pass, it's like like if you're a guy like Jeremy Fears, you're working on those passes all your life playing point guard. I think sometimes when like two guards try to show that they can be a point guard, you might not be in the right spot. The release point might be different. You might be throwing it without your base up underneath you, and all those kind of things. And I think some of that is just stuff that just you learn over time by doing it over and over and over again. So I think like with a guy like Akins. In game is different than doing it in the practice gym, but I think some of that stuff is fundamental.
And I've seen it in practice too, where it's like, man, that was a great pass from Akins, and then a little bit later, it's like a really tragic one.
Yeah, I mentioned Jeremy Fears just a minute ago, and we haven't talked a whole lot about him in this game, but I thought he, like Izzo said, he had one of his best games. I felt like he was just really impactful in this game, and I was thinking this week because a lot of people have written stories, including our own Jake Laskow, about Jeremy Fears' brother, Jeremiah, who's a terrific freshman scorer for Oklahoma, and he's done some really good things. But Michigan State wouldn't trade Jeremy Fears for Jeremiah Fears because Jeremy Fears can do a lot of dang good things as a point guard. And today I think he lived up to his nickname growing up, the floor general, because he threw some really good passes. Some of the touch passes, almost like teardrops to the big men down low. That is not easy to do. He's got a supreme amount of confidence in his ability to pass. I think his defense is getting better. And today I felt like he's making quicker reads so he can kind of go to it really quickly. If he sees there's an opening for him to drive, he's going to take that real quick. But if it's not there, he's going to get it to. He's able to see the floor better, see the opening and the pass at the same time. And we saw in the first half that was really closely contested. Saw him do a lot driving to the basket. Some of those were for dump offs, like I mentioned, but some of them were also for scores or getting to the free throw line. And I think he did one of his better jobs balancing. As a facilitator and as a scorer late in the game, late shot clock situation. Akins calls for the ball. Jeremy Fears keeps it for himself, which is rare for him, and he hits a three. That's not something that you're always going to want to see. He makes it, but that's something you need. It's good to see him hit that three and have the confidence to take it. But his ability to do a little bit better job balancing, also the leadership that Izzo was talking about in the huddles. And I do think that Jaden Akins is a guy that's gaining confidence in his ability to defend, and he's taking a lot of pride in that, and you'll see that continue to grow.
Akins?
So I'm sorry, Jeremy Fears. So Jeremy Fears is a monster today. And, if it wasn't for Coen Carr having the game that he had, I'd be saying Jeremy Fears is the player of the game. Because those two guys, in my opinion, carried this team to victory.
Tom Izzo said this was Jeremy Fears' best game so far as a Spartan.
I agree with him.
As a best game as a Spartan, top to bottom, with the leadership in the huddles and those things. And I saw him go all the way down, slapping everybody. He checked out at one point. He was getting everybody handshakes all the way down to the trainers as he checked out, 12 minutes ago in the game. It's something we haven't seen from Michigan State, the point guard leader type guy doing that.
Yeah.
And he's a wee guy. He's a togetherness guy. Izzo loved him in the huddles, mixing the defense and hitting the open shot. Open three-pointer, hits it. He's been doing that all year. I was concerned from Michigan State's perspective that he would be a poor shooter this year. And there's no clang alert when he takes that open shot these days. We've all got fumbleitis here. I'm dropping things. But the shot's looking better. After practice here 2 days ago, did some interviews, and Fears was the last guy to leave the court. He stayed on the court and took an extra, I don't know how many three-pointers, and the shot looks good. And statistically, it's looking pretty good too. So he's not out here ready to be, Mark Price yet or anything. I'm dating myself. Or Steph Curry. but it's not a weakness. It's not a weakness for this team. You have to honor that, and that just opens up his drive to his ability to drive. Because downhill, you're seeing just a little more burst in his game too with that downhill stuff. Fears is becoming a problem.
Yeah, I mean, talk about the leadership.
Problem.
Even like during introductions, during the starters.
What happened?
He's just talking. He's taking guys aside and talking to them, like while they're waiting for other guys to come on the floor. There's one time where he's bringing it up, where he had to pass it to a big to avoid like a trap type situation, and the big, I swear, was going to pass it back to him when he was coming up across half court, and he just yelled at him to hold it, until he got across half court. And I'm just like, stuff like that. It's just like little tiny details, and then all that stuff adds up and it matters. Like I told you about the miss. The reason I knew there was missed screens is because I saw Jeremy Fears out there talking to the person that missed the screens. And I mean, not just him, but other guards as well. But like his confidence level is really high. But I just do think. And I talked to him about this afterwards today in the locker room. I was just said, are the experience that you've gained accrued through all these starts that you've had at point guard, is it starting to add up to where you're seeing the game a little bit faster? And he feels like it is. Like every game is a new experience that he can add to his lexicon, that he can pull from. And let's face it, Michigan State's playing a ton of different players, ton of different playing groups. We were just talking about like substitution pattern, but it's not easy for a point guard to get used to playing with so many different guys. And I think all Michigan State's point guards have done a pretty good job, acclimating themselves to the different personnel groups that are out there.
Right. All right. Anything else, Paul? All right. Had a lot of fun here covering Michigan State, heading into the holidays. Appreciate all the subscribers at SpartanMag.com. Check it out. Half off, SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber. We will be continuing to cover the transfer portal. Jason Killip doing a great job with that. Jake Laskawa, Kenny Jordan continuing to do well with that as well. We'll be covering that. I was talking about Luka Vincic, the center from Oregon State that Michigan State got a portal commitment from. Played center and right guard for Oregon State. I've been watching him this week. I think he's going to be starting at center next year. Watching his film, I think he's better. I didn't see Tanner Miller's sophomore film at Oregon State. I suspect he's ahead of where Miller was the same age at Oregon State. And Michigan State, of course, has an opening at center. It's going to be Vincic, and I think he's going to be good next year. And then the following year, I think he'll be better than Tanner Miller was this year for Michigan State. That's my prediction there. If he can stay healthy and everything. You've spoken with his coach a little bit.
I'm teasing a story that I'm just about finished writing. But you want to do some stories justice, and I think this is a really good one. I had a chance to catch up with Luka Vincic, his high school coach, and he was telling me, like he's had injuries, like he had double hip surgery last, coming off his what would that be, his freshman season?
Yeah.
So, he did play as a true redshirt freshman, but he had, prior to this past season, he had a double hip surgery, so that was tough on him getting reacclimated to training camp. He was in a situation similar to what Stanton Ramil went through for Michigan State, where you missed a lot of the off season. So if he hadn't, he played about 400 snaps or something like that this year. If he had, had a full off season, he was actually projected to be a starter. But a really interesting story, interesting kid. When Coach Mihalchik recruited him, he told his high school coach, he's like, man, if I could just pack him up and put him in the truck right now and take him home with me to Oregon State, I would. He just loves that kid, and I think it's a really good fit for Michigan State. You hear a lot of stuff about him being a dynamic leader, a charismatic guy, and someone that works harder than anyone else and puts teammates ahead of himself. So if they can get guys like him, they have that kind of mindset, like a Jack Belling type of guy or Aiden Childs, that are team oriented, then I think Michigan State's going to be in a pretty good spot. But I enjoy getting to know some of these guys before they come on campus. But it's a good story, and hopefully I'll put it out the next day or two, because I think it's a good one. I think Michigan State, if they can get high character guys out of the portal, like they did last year with guys like Jordan Turner, and other guys that they got. Tanner Miller is a good example, but high character guys out of the portal, it's not always easy. But he's a guy that can help you on the field as well as the locker room.
They need help on that offensive line. They're
Absolutely.
working on it. We'll be covering that at SpartanMag.com going forward. For Paul Konyndyk, my name is Jim Comparoni. Everybody have safe, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Merry everything. Thanks for all your support at SpartanMag.com over the years. Thanks to Paul Konyndyk and the cast of thousands at SpartanMag.com. We'll be talking to you soon, but we're here from today from East Lansing, Michigan with the Spartans. Been watching the VCast on SpartanMag.com.